The house was the first place I ever lived in alone, and I loved it right up until the night I learned what it feels like to be watched. Not glanced at. Not noticed. Watched, the way a hunter watches something it has already decided to take. I was 24. I just started a job that finally paid enough to stop having roommates. And I found a small rented place on the edge of a brand new development, the kind where half the lots are still bare dirt and wooden stakes with orange ribbon, and the streetlights end a few houses before yours because the county hasn't gotten around to the rest. My boyfriend at the time traveled for work, gone 4 and 5 nights a week, so most nights it was just me in that quiet, and I want to be clear, I loved the quiet. I'd grown up in a loud, crowded house. The silence of that place felt like a thing I had earned. There was a motion light over the back patio. A cheap one, the kind that clicks on if a cat crosses the yard or a moth gets close enough to the sensor. In the first few weeks it went off all the time, and I stopped noticing it the way you stop hearing a clock. It would throw a wash of white light across the concrete and a little patch of grass, and then time out and go dark again, and I never once got up to look. Why would I? It was the suburbs. It was nothing. Then came a night in the middle of November. Cold enough that the windows had that black, mirrored look, where the warm lit room reflects back at you and you can't see out. I was on the couch a little after 1 in the morning, reading, not tired yet, when the motion light clicked on. And for the first time in all those weeks, I looked up. I don't know why that night. Something about the hour, maybe. I got up and went to the kitchen window and looked out at the lit yard, and it was empty. Grass, fence, the dark shapes of the unbuilt lots beyond. Nothing. I told myself it was the wind, and I went back to my book. 10 minutes later, it clicked on again. And this time, when I went to the window, the yard was not empty. At the very back, right at the fence line, past where the light really reached so that it was more a suggestion than a shape, there was a person. Standing. Facing the house. Not doing anything. Not climbing, not creeping, not walking away. Just standing in the freezing dark with their body pointed at my lit windows, at me, the way you'd stand looking at a painting you were trying to decide about. I did the thing you are absolutely not supposed to do. I reached over and turned off the kitchen light so I could see out better. And the second the room went dark and my eyes started to adjust, the shape was gone. Not walking away into the lots. Not ducking. Gone, in the half second I'd blinded myself, which meant he had moved the instant my light went out. Which meant he had been watching my windows closely enough to react to a single switch. I stood there in the dark of my own kitchen with my heart slamming, and that's when I heard it. The softest possible sound, from the back door, maybe 15 feet from where I was standing. The handle. Being tried. Turned slowly all the way to its stop, held, and then eased back so it wouldn't click. No knock. No voice. No hello, is anyone home? A person does not test a door that gently unless the entire point is for the person inside to not hear it. I went up the stairs without turning on a single light, keeping to the edges where the boards don't creak, a thing I had never once had to think about in that house and somehow knew to do now. I got into the bathroom, the only door upstairs with a working lock, and I sat down on the floor with my back against the tub and I called the police in a whisper so low I had to say my address 3 times. The dispatcher told me a unit was 8 minutes out. 8 minutes. I have thought a lot, since, about how long 8 minutes is. It is long enough to listen to a man work his way around the entire outside of your house. Because that's what I did. I sat on that cold tile and I listened to him move. The back door again. Then the scrape of the side window, the one over the little laundry nook. Then a soft, rhythmic pressure against the window over the kitchen sink, testing whether the latch would give. He went from opening to opening in order, patient, unhurried, taking his time, a man who was not panicking because he did not believe anyone was going to stop him. At one point I heard the flat sound of a palm against glass, steadying, and I put my own hand over my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound. What saved me was headlights. A neighbor, 2 doors down, coming home late from somewhere, swung into the cul-de-sac and their high beams raked across the whole front and side of my house, throwing the yard into hard bright relief for 3 or 4 seconds. And everything stopped. The testing, the pressure, the soft careful sounds. All of it, at once, like a held breath. When the officers pulled up 6 minutes later, he was already gone. Over the back fence and out into the empty lots where there were no cameras and no lights and no one to see which direction he took. They found what he left. Fresh pale pry marks gouged into the frame of the back door, down low near the handle, where he'd started to work a tool in before the headlights came. Footprints pressed deep into the soft soil of the flower bed under the kitchen window, where he had stood on the dirt to reach the glass, the toes pointed at the house. And in the morning, when it was light, an officer walked me out to the back patio and pointed up at my motion light, and asked me if I'd had trouble with it. The bulb had been unscrewed. Not taken out. Just turned, a quarter of a turn, enough to break the connection so the light would stay dark. Loosened by hand. And that is the part that changed how I moved through the world. Because he had done that first. Before any of it. Some earlier day, in the evening or the late afternoon, he had walked into my yard while I was at work or making dinner, and he had reached up and turned that bulb just enough to kill it, so that when he came back in the dark, the one light that might have caught his face would stay off. He had cased my house. He had planned around its lights. He had been in my yard, calm and unhurried, long before the night I finally looked up from my book. I moved out within the month. Broke the lease, ate the deposit, didn't care. But the thing that stayed with me was never the pry marks or the footprints or even the door handle. It was the standing. It was trying to imagine how long he had stood at that fence line in the freezing November dark before he ever came closer. Long enough to learn me. Long enough to know which window was the couch and which was the sink, to know that I lived alone, to watch me get up for water and come back, to watch me turn my pages. Long enough to decide, calmly, with no rush at all, that tonight was the night, and then to be wrong about it only because a stranger happened to come home late. I keep my porch bulbs tight now. I check them, actually put a hand on them, more often than a sane person should. And every so often, on some ordinary night, when a motion light clicks on somewhere down my street for no reason at all, no cat, no wind, no car, I still feel it come up the back of my neck like cold water. That old certainty. That somewhere out past where the light reaches, patient and unhurried and pointed right at the windows, something is standing very still, and facing the house. My brother bought his first house that spring, and before he'd even finished moving in he asked me to house sit for a week while he and his wife flew out to visit her family. New house, quiet street, a full fridge, and nothing to do but water a few plants and sleep in a guest room that smelled like fresh paint. I said yes before he'd finished asking. I was between apartments and between jobs, and a free week in a nice empty house felt like a small vacation. That is the word I keep coming back to. Empty. I thought the house was empty. It was a 2-story on a cul-de-sac, the last house he could afford in a neighborhood that was nicer than the one we grew up in. And he was so proud of it that he'd walked me through every room twice on move-in day, pointing at the crown molding and the deep closets and the little attic hatch in the ceiling of the upstairs hall like they were features in a magazine. I remember standing under that hatch while he talked. I remember not thinking a single thing about it. The first night, I was downstairs on the couch, TV on, a plate on my knee, when I heard footsteps overhead. slow ones. Crossing the upstairs hall, left to right, unhurried, the deliberate weight of a grown person walking somewhere they meant to go. I muted the television and sat perfectly still, and the house went quiet, and I told myself the thing everyone tells themselves in a house that isn't theirs. New construction. Settling. The wood adjusting to the heat. Pipes. I actually said the word pipes out loud, to the empty room, like saying it would make it true. Then I made myself get up and go check, and I turned on every light on my way, and every room was empty, and every window was locked, and I felt like an idiot and went to bed. The second day is when the small things started, and small things are worse than footsteps, because footsteps you can blame on a house. A loaf of bread I was certain I'd left out on the counter was back in the cupboard, twist-tied, in a spot I wouldn't have chosen. The big bath towel was damp in the evening when I hadn't showered since morning. A drinking glass I'd left in the sink was clean and back in the cabinet. Each one, on its own, was nothing. Each one had an explanation if I was willing to believe I was tired and scattered and not paying attention, and I was very willing, because the other explanation was not something a person lets into their head while they are alone in a house at night. The third night, the doorbell camera went off. My brother had one of those smart doorbells, and he'd added me to the app so I could see deliveries, and at a little after 3 in the morning my phone buzzed on the nightstand and lit the whole room. Motion detected. I opened it half asleep, expecting a cat or a moth or a branch, and the front porch was empty. Nothing there at all. But he had a second camera, one I'd forgotten about, a little indoor one he'd stuck at the end of the upstairs hall, pointed down the row of bedroom doors, because his wife had wanted to keep an eye on things while the house was new. I thumbed over to that feed out of nothing but curiosity. And for about 1 second, before the clip ended, something crossed the frame. A shape. Low, and quick, and quiet, moving from the far bedroom doorway toward the ceiling hatch, the way a person moves when they are bent over and trying to be small. Then the clip cut out and the feed went to that flat gray night vision stillness, an empty hallway, every door closed, like nothing had happened at all. I did not go up. I need to be honest about that, because I think people imagine they'd grab a bat and charge the stairs, and I did the opposite. I sat on that couch with every light in the house on and my back to a wall and my phone in both hands, and I watched the hallway feed until the battery on the camera died, and then I watched the front door instead, and I did not move until the sky went from black to that thin gray that means morning is deciding to come. Only then, in real daylight, with the sun actually up, did I climb the stairs, carrying a kitchen knife I felt ridiculous holding, my whole arm shaking. The attic hatch was in the ceiling of the upstairs hall closet, above the coats. And it was open. Not sealed the way it had been when my brother showed it to me. Pushed to one side, a few inches. A wedge of black showing at the edge. I dragged a chair over and I stood on it and I lifted the cover the rest of the way and I held my phone up into that crawlspace with the flashlight on, and I understood, all at once, that I had not been alone in that house for a single minute since I'd arrived. There was a nest up there. That is the only word for it. A sleeping bag, unrolled and flattened from use, tucked along a beam where the roof was highest. A row of empty water bottles lined up neat against the wood. Food wrappers, the exact brands from the pantry downstairs, the granola bars, the crackers. A phone charger plugged into an outlet I hadn't known the attic even had. And a smell, close and human and wrong, in a space that should have smelled like dust and insulation. Someone had been living up there. Coming down at night, over my head, while I slept 8 feet below. Eating the food. Using the shower, which explained the towel. Putting my glass away. And going back up through a hatch above the coats before the light came. The police think it had been going on since before my brother ever closed on the house. The place had sat empty for almost 2 months between the previous owners moving out and my brother moving in, and sometime in that gap, someone found a way into the attic. Through a gap in the eaves around the back where the soffit didn't quite meet the roofline, and they made themselves a home in the space above the ceiling. And when the new people arrived, the moving trucks and the furniture and the noise, this person did not leave. They simply adjusted. Learned the new footsteps below them. Learned the new routine. Learned to wait. They never caught him. That gap in the eaves was open when the officers checked it, the screen bent outward, and whoever had been up there was gone, out through the roof and down and away, probably while I was still sitting on the couch waiting for daylight. My brother sealed that house like a submarine afterward. New locks on every door, cameras on all four sides, steel mesh bolted over every gap in the eaves, the attic hatch screwed down flush. He did everything right. It still took his wife almost a year before she could sleep through the night in there. But the thing I think about, the thing that comes for me when I'm the one lying awake, is that hallway camera. That 1 second of footage. Because when I finally sat down and really thought it through, I realized the shape in the clip wasn't coming down. It was moving toward the hatch. It was going back up. Which means for however long before that, an hour, 2 hours, the middle of that third night, he had already been down in the house. In the dark. Walking the halls. Standing, maybe, at the top of the stairs, looking down at the glow of the television and the back of my head on the couch where I'd finally fallen asleep. He had been all the way down, all the way close, and the only reason a camera ever caught him at all is that he was already finished, and quietly climbing home. I was 16 the night the phone call started, and I have never in my life, before or since, been so glad to hear a police siren coming up my street. My parents were at a wedding 2 towns over, the kind with a hotel block and an open bar, and they'd decided months earlier to just stay the night rather than drive home late. They'd asked if I'd be okay on my own and I'd rolled my eyes at them, because I was 16 and being left alone for one night was not babysitting, it was freedom. I had the house, I had the TV, I had a frozen pizza and no bedtime. I was thrilled. I remember being thrilled, right up until about 9 o'clock. There was a storm that night. It had been building since the afternoon, one of those slow heavy systems that sits over you for hours, and by evening it had really settled in, thunder far off at first and then closer, the lights dimming and surging in that way that makes the whole house feel smaller and older than it is. We still had a landline back then. An old cordless phone my mom refused to give up, mounted on the kitchen wall with a handset she'd carry around the house. And a little after 9, over the sound of the rain, it rang. I answered it the way you answer a phone at 16, without thinking, mouth half full. A man's voice, calm and pleasant and completely ordinary, said he was sorry, he thought he had the wrong number. He apologized twice, actually, very polite, and hung up. I didn't think a thing about it. Wrong numbers happened. I went back to the couch. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Same voice. Warm, unhurried, friendly. Only this time he didn't apologize for anything. This time he asked me, like it was the most natural question in the world, whether I was home by myself tonight. And some instinct, some small good instinct I will thank for the rest of my life, made me lie. I said no. I said my dad was in the other room. There was a pause on the line, a considering kind of pause, and the rain filled it, and then he said, in that same pleasant voice, without any anger at all, no he isn't. And he hung up. I stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand and my heart going, and I did the only thing I could think to do. I followed the cord to the wall and I unplugged the landline, base and all, and the little light on it died, and I felt, for about 10 seconds, enormously better. Because now it couldn't ring. I had solved it. I had unplugged the problem. And that was when my cell phone lit up on the counter. Unknown number. I stared at it. I let it go to voicemail. It started again immediately, buzzing and turning in a slow circle on the counter, and I let that go too, and it started a third time, and something about the relentlessness of it, the way it would not stop, made me pick it up and put it to my ear without saying a word. And the same calm voice, the same friendly patient voice, said, "You shouldn't have unplugged the other one. That was rude." And I understood two things in the same instant. He could see that I had unplugged it. And he had my cell number, which was not listed anywhere, which I had given only to friends. I ran. I didn't grab shoes, I didn't grab a jacket, I ran up the stairs to my parents' bedroom and into their closet, the big one with the door that actually locked. And I sat down on a pile of my mother's shoes and I called 911 and I whispered everything into the phone as fast as I could get it out. The wrong number, the questions, the voice, the fact that he knew. The dispatcher was very calm, and she told me units were on the way, and she told me to stay exactly where I was and stay on the line and stay quiet. So I did. I stayed quiet. And in the quiet, over the storm, from somewhere downstairs in the house, I heard the landline ring. The landline I had unplugged. I want you to understand what that did to me, crouched in that closet in the dark. Because there is no explaining that sound. I had pulled the base out of the wall with my own hands. I had watched the light go out. And it was ringing. It rang 3 times, 4, that old shrill electronic ring cutting through the thunder, and then it stopped, and the silence after it was so much worse than the ringing had been. The police were there in 12 minutes. I heard the sirens come up the street and I have never loved a sound more. I heard them come through the front door, I heard them moving through the downstairs, clearing it room by room. Calling out to each other, and the dispatcher told me to stay put until an officer came to the closet door himself and identified himself and told me it was safe. And when one finally did, when he opened that closet door and I saw the uniform and the flashlight, I nearly collapsed. But he had a look on his face. A careful, tight look. And before he took me downstairs he asked me a question I didn't understand at first. He asked if our house had more than one phone jack. It did. There was an old extension down in the basement, from before I was even born, a heavy beige phone bolted to the wall stud right above my dad's workbench, on the same line as the one upstairs. Nobody ever used it. I'd honestly forgotten it existed. And when the officers had gone down into the basement to clear it, they had found that phone off its hook. Hanging by its cord. Still, very slightly, swinging. They traced every call that night, later, and this is the part that I have never been able to make sit right in my head. All of them, the wrong number, the friendly questions, the you shouldn't have unplugged it, and the ring that came after I killed the upstairs phone, all of them had come from inside my own house. From the extension in the basement. When I unplugged the base in the kitchen, I only unplugged that one handset. The line was still live to the basement phone. Someone had been standing down there in the dark the whole time, at the bottom of my own house, a floor and a half below me, calling up the stairs to a 16-year-old on the same phone line, listening to me answer, watching, somehow, enough to know when I'd unplugged the kitchen phone. Talking to me from the basement while I thought I was talking to the world outside. They never found him. The bulkhead door, the slanted cellar door on the outside of the house that opened into the basement, was standing open when they checked it, banging in the wind, rain blowing in across the concrete. And on that concrete floor there were wet footprints. The officers followed them with their lights. The prints crossed the basement to the inside stairs, and went up, through the door into the ground floor hallway, and there, on my mother's pale hallway carpet, they showed up as faint gray smears, one after another, leading down the hall. They stopped outside my bedroom door. He had come up. while I was locked in the closet upstairs whispering to a dispatcher, while the friendly voice had gone quiet. He had set the basement phone swinging on its cord and come up the inside stairs and walked down the hall to my bedroom, and he had stood outside my door. And then, for a reason no one has ever been able to explain to me, no reason that makes any sense, he had turned around, and walked back down the hall, and gone down into the basement and out through the bulkhead into the storm, and vanished. The footprints go to my door and then they turn and go back. He was that close. And something made him leave. I'm grown now, with a house and a family of my own, and I do not own a landline and I never will, and my kids think it's a funny quirk of mine and I have never told them why. But on bad nights, when a storm comes through and the power dips and the whole house takes on that small old feeling, I still get up and I check the basement door. Twice. Because the thing I have never been able to get past, after all these years, is not that a stranger got into my house. Strangers get into houses. It happens. It's that he was already inside when he called me the first time. He was downstairs, in the dark, the entire evening, while I ate my pizza and watched my show and felt so grown up and so free. He didn't break in during the calls. He was there before them. And he waited, patiently, quietly, at the bottom of my house, until I was good and comfortable, until I felt completely safe and completely alone, before he picked up the phone and let me hear his voice.